right. Welcome, everybody. We'll call the meeting to order. We'll begin, as we usually do, with public audience. I just want to say a few words before we get going. The way I've conducted these meetings in the past has been a little bit less formal, with sort of taking questions and comments from the audience as we go along. I really appreciate the fact that we have public audience at these meetings, and I'm grateful that you're here. But I wanted to, when we're having our discussion and running the meeting, to have it just be this group. So I wanted to encourage you that if there are things you wanted to share, things you want us to consider, to please make sure you get that in during public audience. And of course, I'm always available at any time after the meeting, before the meeting, as I know other members are here as well. So with that, let's. Would anyone like to begin with public audience? I don't want to.
Oh, well, okay, I will. Diane Nash, 5 Merriwood. Obviously, I've spoken at the Board of Selectmen's meeting too much at length, but I'm really, really concerned when we consider the sale of an open space piece of land. No matter what the ramifications are, it is a very slippery slope. I've been in real estate more years than most of you have lived in town. I've seen people, for very good reasons, make a decision to grant an extra alleyway, an extra right-of-way. It leads to access to, in this case, an old Cobro piece of land that could allow the homeowner, not the present homeowner, but the next homeowner, to subdivide the lot, gain access to a road, to totally change the character of a neighborhood. I've seen it happen. I can give you specifics at some future time. This parcel of land that you're considering, would one become a farm, be taxed differently, at a loss to the town, and we would be rewarding people for using our space inappropriately. And all of this is contrary to what we hold ourselves as being, finding open space important, zoning important, land use control important. To flip it or exchange it is really a slippery slope, and at the state level, I'm sure you're aware now, last year they passed, you can't just do that without having a series of public meetings. So I would urge you, if this piece is important to this homeowner, make it a useful use, a life use lease, maybe. Give it to him, give him the tax break if you feel that's an important thing to do. But if the land ever reverts to anything other than a farm, it goes back to the town. So I'm trying to find ways that you may want to accomplish what you consider the greater good, but to reward someone for using our open space and then selling it to them in exchange for maybe a right to put a bike trail in, just is the wrong thing for Simsbury to be doing.
Thank you, Diane. Yes.
We do have a comment. I hadn't seen all the details of it. I want to sort of second what she's saying, and that over the life of my career, I've seen many instances where a municipality had a park, some sort of public owned land, typically parks, and they're looking to build some good use, playground, recreation building, something like that. They said, well, gee, we have this land, we already own it, we don't have to buy it, let's build a park, or build a building there. And then next thing you know, they build another little building on there, and another little building, and pretty soon, the park is gone. So my thought on this was, if the person wants to use that piece of property where he's been using it, then lease it, like the rest of the property in the triangle is leased to farmers. It doesn't have to be sold and the town lose control of it. That's my comment.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else in public audience? Oh, I'm sorry. Could you just give your name and your address?
John Schaefer, 16 Lossbrook Road.
Thank you. Anyone else for public audience before we move on?
Is this pertaining to open space in general?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So my name is Mary Pat Bolbrock. I reside at 82 West Ledge Road in West Simsbury, Connecticut. And I'm here as both a resident and also I'm a volunteer with the Center for Biological Diversity's grassroots initiative, which was just started for the state of Connecticut. And the initiative's name is Mobilize for the Wild. And in part, its goals are to create public awareness about the mismanagement of public lands and forests, which would of course include open space, designated open space by the town of Simsbury. And I just want to go on record as stating that, you know, residents and visitors alike gravitate towards this town due to its bucolic nature, you know, the beauty and the nature of it. And for anyone who lives here, I think it goes without saying that our open space, as it is presently set up, raises not only our property values, but our quality of life. And it also increases local businesses by supporting the outdoor recreation that Simsbury has become known for. And I really think that it would be irreparable, it would cause irreparable harm to the town if we start carving up our open space for a short-term financial benefit. Because once you lose it, it's gone. You don't get it back. So I would really urge this committee to reconsider the proposal and to protect our open space. And as for anyone here, our meetings are being held in Canton. It's a grassroots initiative. It's held usually the end of Wednesdays, either at the Flatbread or the Panera Bread. And I would encourage anyone who's interested in coming to me at the end of the meeting, and I can give you information on it. But I will be reporting to our new grassroots organization about what this town decides to do going forward, what this committee decides to do going forward regarding open space, because that does fall within our goals. Thanks.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Anybody else for public audience?
Yeah. I'm Bill Cordner. I reside at 65 High Ridge Road in West Simsbury. And I'm just learning about this land swap, and I totally agree with the points that have already been made. But also, I'm new to this. My sense is that this issue has been looked at and decisions almost made already, and here we are at the Open Space Committee. I don't know enough about the process, but I would hope that when something like this pops up, the first place you go is to the Open Space Committee. My sense is this is happening more towards the tail end of the process, and maybe I'm wrong. But if someone could comment on how the process works, because I really think something like this should bubble up earlier on in the process with the Open Space Commission.
Yeah, I think that it's more of a function of when our meetings fell than any deliberate attempt to make this committee the last in the process. We meet the most irregularly in comparison to conservation and planning. Anything you would add, Maria?
No, exactly that. The referral was made to all three entities at the same time. We were just happened to be the last on the meeting schedule.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Anything else you wanted to add? I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you. So we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. Were there any proposed changes? This was for our meeting on January 8th.
It was a very extensive meeting, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
Record time.
Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next, we have a couple of oral reports, and the first being the Parks and Open Space Master Plan.
So, at this point, our consultants are waiting for us to get back with any final feedback on the last plan that they submitted. We've had meetings with the Park and Rec Commission. I'm taking notes at this meeting on any final comments the group would like to make, but we've solicited comments from the Open Space Committee, or I received comments from some residents and members of the Open Space Committee. I received written comments from some members of the Parks and Recreation Commission. By the end of the week, those comments will be forwarded to the consultants. They will be working on working toward a final draft of the document that we hope to have viewed by the Parks and Rec Commission at the end of March. We may have to hold a special meeting to have this board get a peek at it before then, before we give them any. What we're going to be seeing is near a final document, any tweaks to it that they will then make and present to the Board of Selectmen on April 27th.
Right.
The final report. So that's kind of where we are at this point.
Is that online, Tom? Where is that?
You saw the last document. Nothing's changed since the last thing you've seen, the one on January 6th.
The one
Just
that
been
they
collecting
presented
feedback
at the
since then.
meeting?
Yes, that's just been collecting feedback since then.
Okay. Did we ever get a hard copy or an electronic version of
It
that?
was
or
emailed
something?
out.
It was? Okay. So there's been no update since then?
Nothing from them that's updated. We've been in contact with them by the teleconference meetings.
Okay.
So they've been taking notes during those meetings, but we haven't gotten another document back
Okay.
from them. The next one that comes back will be the rough draft of the final draft.
Right. And then April 22nd is the
April
expected.
27th is the
27th.
tentative Board of Selectmen presentation.
Okay. Any other questions? Anything Susan or Marjorie wanted to add as their liaisons to the process?
Well, I would just add, I guess that unless someone was on a commission and emailed it or went to that meeting, there's really no opportunity for feedback. So I guess the only people that have been emailed it are Parks and Rec and Open Space. Is that correct? Or did it go to other
Those residents who
boards?
attended the meeting have also provided, a couple of people here have sent me feedback from that meeting.
Yeah, I knew they were there, so I
Non-commission
sent it,
members.
I sent it to them because I knew they were at the meeting and might want to send feedback. Okay.
Would it be appropriate to put a draft on our website, and then I could link to it on my first selectman's report?
Yeah, and I think we have the
we had the PowerPoint,
presentation
yeah.
is attached to the last minutes of the Open Space Committee meeting. And I think the matrix was part of the last packet of the Open Space Committee packet online. But we'll double check to make sure that both the matrix and the presentation are on the
Yeah.
Open Space Committee link.
Because I felt a little bit weird being the person that sent it out, so I just sent it to people that attended
Double
that
check.
meeting, but I think it really should be available to people.
Yeah, we'll double check.
Yeah, it's obviously a publicly available document. I
Right.
want to do what I can.
Right,
in
I mean,
my
I
position.
shouldn't be the
Yeah, do-
conduit
Yeah.
to send it out.
Yeah, that's a good catch. Thank you.
I think it is, but
Okay.
we'll double check.
Okay. So then the next item is the Stewardship Policies and Land Management Work Group.
Oh, that would be Mike.
Sorry.
So, actually, Conservation Commission at their last meeting kind of discussed some of the work that the working group has completed to date. The group hasn't met in a while.
No, we
Due to our-
missed the last meeting, so we're going to be talking about it at the next meeting, going over what we have.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also, so we have a new zoning officer on board, came over from the town of Windsor, who he was, in his role in Windsor, he was the environmental planner. He's looking at Windsor's criteria that they use for determining sale of or purchase of open space, and we're maybe mirror the two efforts together. They have a little different structure than what we were working on. However, they had some values to certain things to look at while they're judging whether you want to purchase a property or not. So we'll be meeting soon on that.
That's what we really need that. I mean, in conservation, we had this application for the land swap come before us, but we had no real guidance. And I think that's a weakness that we have. It would really depend on who was there that day, and also determination of what the town wants to do. I mean, conservation can add in, say what they want, but the town should really have a policy.
Yeah, agreed.
So the last thing that, and I just want to say, Marjorie, I think I noticed people can't hear you when you were talking. So Marjorie was just saying that we need a policy, basically. So the last thing I thought that happened was we had kind of a list of criteria, and then the next checkpoint was and we all looked at it at the last open space meeting, and we were going to kind of think about it and see if there's anything we needed to add or change or whatever. So that's still where we're at right now. Okay.
Are we meeting again? Or do we need to meet again?
We should meet again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see the
Circle back.
Information from Windsor,
Yeah.
actually.
Okay, anything else on this? Okay, thank you. Item 4 is the open space referral. And I just want to see if Jeff or Mike wanted to provide any context or overview.
Yeah, do you want to start with?
Yeah, sure.
Trail.
So we'll talk about the trail easement that is pending. As you know, the town has been trying to develop a connection between the Farmington Valley Heritage Trail and Terriffill for many, many years. We're advancing the design on 2 of the sections right now. The section that involves this easement, which is from Route 10, 315 intersection to Curtis and Patterson Park, and the other section being from Terriffill to the town of Bloomfield town line. When we initiated the design on this project, we discovered that there wasn't sufficient state right-of-way in Terriffill Road to accommodate the trail, even though, the intention was to do that over the years. Because Route 315 had been widened near the intersection of Route 10, there wasn't, again, enough right-of-way. There's normally, 10 to 20 feet of additional right-of-way that the state reserves for future transportation purposes. In this particular location, along the frontage of the old well property on Terriffill Road, there was not sufficient width for a 10-foot wide trail for the required signage and the buffer between the travel way and the bike path. So this is just an overall plan of the project. It shows, again, the green line represents the future trail from Route 10 and 315 to Curtis and Patterson Park. And again, the only required easement is along the frontage of the old well property. If you go to your package, the last page is a formal easement map that we prepared. And it's really considered a sliver take. It's only 19 feet wide on the west side, and it goes to 0 on the east side. Total land area is about 0.1 acres. And we've actually done an appraisal of the property, and we've been informally meeting with the property owner to kind of see if he's, cooperative and will work with us on it. And I think that's really the background.
So if I could start, is that the coming off of Route 10, we already have either an easement or sufficient room as we basically go by the daycare center to have the path in that location?
Yes.
Okay. And once we get past the Farmington River, again, we have sufficient space to get this, the next issue is the Terriffill to Bloomfield easement?
This only really deals with the section to Curtis and Patterson Park.
Okay.
There is a gap between Terriffill that's going to be a future project. It's a little more complex. But all the land east of the Farmington River is owned by the town of Simsbury that abuts the state right-of-way. So, if we needed the land, it would be there. So really, this is the only private property that gets impacted by the project.
And if the easement was not obtained, what are the design alternatives for the path? or are there any?
There are alternatives. What we're trying to achieve here is not to eliminate the number of crossings across the roadway.
That's important.
This gets them on the right side of the road. It kind of utilizes the existing crosswalk at Curtis and Patterson Park that people are used to.
Yep.
That has good sight line. So, potentially we could move it to the other side of the roadway, but it's not as favorable. And it doesn't reduce any of the environmental impacts potentially from the project. So this is the most favorable alignment for the project. And I think, at some level, we could agree to the property owner, the property owner will agree with us, acquiring the property, at least in principle at this point in time.
Just a process question today, because we've got two issues. One is the a proposed sale of a parcel of open space, and the other is an acquisition. Are we looking to give an opinion on both of those today?
I guess I defer to Mike on that.
So technically, the only one we really need open space to respond to is the potential disposition of the parcel on Holcomb Street. However, these two transactions are somewhat related, and so I think if you wanted to provide feedback on both, that would be helpful.
And so the reason why Jeff started first was, so we approached the property owner on the bike easement, and then the property owner, the same person, said, well, I'd like to talk about what's in my backyard. So if you go to the third page of your packet, second last page, it's a copy of the approved subdivision map for the Milton subdivision. Obviously, he owns the house at 133. He indicated he would like to purchase an acre of land behind his house, which was associated with that open space. So that first conversation triggered the second request. Because like I said, he's the same property owner. He's completed an appraisal of the area. This area appraised at a small amount. He was prepared to pay the town the market value for this acre of land that he's looking to purchase. The Planning Commission has reviewed this. Is it okay, Bill, I give this report from planning? The Planning Commission found they were supportive of the sale of the open space. They found it consistent with the plan of conservation and development. Some of the aspects that were discussed at that meeting were the fact the town has no plans for maintaining it. We're not maintaining the property right now. There's limited to no public access to this because there's a fence, it's fenced in. You have to go through basically Steve's backyard.
So you'd have to trespass on private property to get there?
To get to it.
Okay.
Because of the fence, et cetera, that's run in the rear. This also was reviewed by the Conservation Commission. They were supportive of it with the consideration that a deed restriction be placed in this area, that no future buildings or structures would be constructed in the area, so the intent of the open space would last.
Yeah.
So it's one of those areas, the open space, it was set aside to fulfill the 20% set aside in the subdivision regulations. This was pre-time where an applicant could offer a fee in lieu of setting aside 20% of the total area for open space. So, I mean, this was their way to fulfill the open space requirement. It was also before the days that statute allowed the Planning Commission, also the third option when dealing with subdivisions is not take any open space. It was the days where we either you had to provide your 20% open space or the subdivision could not be approved.
Before we get any deeper into questions, I wanted to, did I share with everyone a letter from Helen Peterson? She wishes she could be here today. Let me give you a copy. Thanks, Jerry. Sure. She asked me to read it into the record, so I thought I would do that, and then we could open it up for questions and conversation. So I'm doing my best to channel Helen here. As I understand the referral, it is the result of the town's need to purchase an easement along Terriffill Road for the bike path, a very laudable project, one that should be pursued independently. The owner of that property has requested in turn to purchase from the town a 1-acre parcel of open space abutting his property on Holcomb Street, and accepting his appraisal is not in the best interest of the town. My comments remain more importantly to the issue of should the town sell a parcel or any parcel of open space land at this time. As I read the referral, a number of assumptions are appallingly incorrect and misguided. The town of Simsbury does not maintain this area, nor has plans for future maintenance of this area. Incorrect. The town does maintain the area in its natural state as intended, in part and appropriately as conserved land. I strongly urge the committee to pay close attention to the meaning of the words maintain and maintenance as inferred in this referral. Are we still assuming collectively within our town government, agencies, departments, officials, and staff that to maintain an area means only mowing, cleaning, and actively altering its use? What has happened to all of the meaningful discussions we have had based on credible emerging science of the value of maintaining an area of open space in its natural state? As to no future plans, what of our many discussions and efforts regarding the emerging value of open space for connectivity, wildlife corridors, and the pollinator program? Where might this area fit? Further, this area is no less an important area within greater conserved land as it relates to the health of the earth. I could go on, but let me go back to why I stated it would be ill-advised for any sale at this time. My responsibility, the committee's responsibility, as the designated stewards of the town's open space, is to advise and assist the administration, Board of Selectmen, in making good, important decisions regarding our conserved land. What is hindering our ability to do this effectively right now is the lack of a stewardship policy. It is important that we get this done, and certainly before this or any referral can be considered. Such a sale now allows a precedent we cannot live with rightly. Without a viable and worthwhile policy that truly reflects the value that all of our residents place on our conserved lands, we're at risk that a dangerous precedent will dictate our policy. And we're at risk that the Planning and Conservation Commission will continue to make decisions without that policy to guide them. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to be part of this committee's deliberations from a distance. Helen.
There's a PS on the back here.
Oh, thank you.
Helen, as you remember, Helen always has like one more comment.
The referral states that the abutting property owner has maintained the area of open space over the years. Was that with or without the town's knowledge? Again, without a policy, and appropriate practices and precedents will occur. So with that, I just wanted to open up for any questions or conversation.
So a couple of questions, if I could. I just want to verify what I think I'm making assumptions. I just want to make sure they're correct. So this is a landlocked piece of property. This piece of property does not abut Barndoor Hill Roads or Holcomb Street. No. Are there?
Well, actually, it abuts open spaces associated with Wyndham, which is to the northeast, but
That's open space, correct?
Yeah, to the southwest, it's labeled on the map Colborough.
I see that.
That's a building lot that was approved part of the Meadowwood subdivision.
And so is that owned by Meadowwood?
Right now, it's owned by Griffin Land. However, the abutting property owner actually has first right of refusal on that parcel.
Okay. And are there any other easements or rights of access on this piece of land that are not indicated anywhere here on the map?
The only other easement was the drainage easement. It's shown on the map, though. No, there's not any. I'm not aware of anything based on the survey data that we have.
Do you know offhand, if we were to allow this landowner to purchase this parcel, what would be the total acreage of his property? And would that in any way change his ability to a subsequent owner to develop the property? Because I'm in total agreement with the deed restriction, and I'm wondering if the deed restriction, if this was to go through, might also be considered to have that there could be no subdivision of the entire parcel.
So it'd be 4 acres. Well, here's the issue. Doesn't qualify to have another lot from a frontage standpoint, because you only have 173, 240, so it's just over the requirement for a frontage in an R40 zoning district. It's in an R40 zoning district, and it's been subdivided post-1969, so therefore you could not come in through the rear lot regulation of the zoning regulations. So there's two things preventing you from splitting it, creating an additional building lot, although you would have enough acreage in the R40 zoning district to have two building lots. Those two regulations would stop you. The only wild card of the mix was that if you were to split it, you'd come in under 830G, but that's kind of, that's the affordable housing override or appeal process,
Yep.
which then would mean a set-aside's required. The other thing that would limit this is the fact that, he's on septic. So soils would limit the ability, you'd have to demonstrate you can have a working septic system from your existing house and any proposed development that you'd have.
Okay. So then, back to you, Eric. I think that, in other words, what I'm looking at is the fact that while this landowner indicates he wants to use it for grazing and for his own purposes and won't build any structures on it, I think that the commission just needs to be, or the committee needs to be sure that we don't open a door to a subsequent purchaser trying to take advantage of the fact that they now have an extra acre and putting a new structure on Mr. Antonio's original parcel of land, which then would kind of, if you will, I'll call it a rear lot. But it sounds like that really should not be a significant problem. All right.
Yeah. I would be, if we move forward with this, I would be supportive of a deed restriction similarly to what conservation.
Well, conservation, but one of the things I just noted in Helen's letter, when she said that the town can't maintain it, the town can't maintain it. But we do have the policy of, that the town shouldn't have to maintain the land, that nature can do that. But we do have a problem with invasive plants, so we should have the right to be able to go in to do that sort of thing. And if it's closed off, that makes it very, very difficult. Actually, the sheep help. I like the ideas that were brought up that we didn't have access to at the conservation meeting, which again goes to the whole thing that we need a policy to guide us at 7:30 at night when we all come in. We need good policies that we can go to and say, this is what the town wants to do. I mean, this seemed like a very worthwhile project, but we tried to put a restriction on it. But I like the idea of leasing it to the homeowner for that period of time.
Tom, do we go on this property and do anything?
No.
Okay.
Other than farmers, is there precedence for leasing?
I'm not aware, only agricultural leases I'm aware of.
We have a few
for open space
residential
property.
Yeah,
leases.
that's true.
But those are houses that we own that we lease.
I'm sorry, what was the question, Eric? That's okay, I was taking minutes.
That's okay.
and-
Other than farmers, do we lease any properties? And Mike said, obviously, very limited.
We have those residential leases like
Right.
at the farms.
Right. We have about 6 units that we rent out to low-income folks that we own. We have the 3 ag leases for the smaller parcels. We have the larger ag lease for Gifts of Love. We have a lease, the skating center lease is property, it's land that we own, but their building is on it, so we have a lease with them. I'm trying to,
West Mountain Road, there's a home we lease.
Yeah.
yeah, those are just a few that come to mind off the top of my head.
Other questions or comments?
Well, I think the other comment I'd make is, and this comes from the Park and Rec side, this bike path has long been a desire, a priority, with one obstacle after another. And if working out whatever deal is worked out is beneficial in moving that forward process, we're one of the roadblocks in the entire state as to getting a complete greenway from Florida to Maine. And that, to me, also, this particular location for the bike path is critical to part of what our plans have been to try to get traffic up into the Terriffill area, to take advantage of the center of Terriffill, to take advantage of our parks that are located in the Terriffill area, and to connect with the Greenway coming down there through Bloomfield. So I see a real benefit to, I don't hear a quid pro quo here, but we need that easement. And I totally agree that a terrible solution would be to move this bike path on the other side of that road with the amount of traffic and the sight lines of that road. That is just dangerous. And if we can do what we're trying to accomplish by keeping it on the same side of the road as being proposed, on behalf of Park and Rec, I really see a benefit to that.
Agree. For me, I agree and appreciate the comments today, specifically around that we need a policy to guide us. And I'm glad that we're working on a policy. And I think we should do everything we can to continue to move that forward. I don't see this particular sale of open space as setting any kind of a precedent. This came up because we have a property owner who's very interested in acquiring an acre that's adjacent to his property, and he also has a piece of land that the town greatly needs to forward one of its priorities. And the way I'm looking at it is we have a piece of open space that is inaccessible to the public, and we would be gaining a piece of open space that would be accessible to all of our residents. It would serve hundreds of people every day as they cycle to Curtis Park. So I see a tremendous public benefit in allowing this to move forward.
So I mean, obviously, I support the bike path very strongly, but I have a number of questions. So does there have to be the 19-foot width? Because I've seen in some cases the path is just basically adjacent to the road. Not every piece of it has to have the full width for the signage and the buffer and all of that. So I just didn't know if there was any wiggle room on that issue, just for a small segment of it, not for the
Yeah,
whole
we've worked
thing.
closely with the DOT staff and also trying to meet a certain standard for bicycle multi-use path designs.
Yeah.
It's much more favorable to have a buffer strip, a safety zone per se, between, again, the traveled way and the bikeway. Plus, there's a need for a right to grade from that new pathway. So those rights we're also taking as part of that 19 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So we've tried to minimize it, but, we also want to try to maintain a standard of design. And again, the signage requirements from DOT require a certain width of, tree belt, I would call it, between the roadway and the bikeway for the actual signage for the roadway. These signs are fairly large, they're wide, 2-post signs, so there's a certain width requirement for those.
I'm just wondering, because we don't have that on like Hop Meadow Street where the Greenway is, or other areas. There's a lot of areas on the Greenway that don't have that, so.
I'd agree, but again, I would say that those don't meet current standards for bikeway design.
Okay. So when I first heard about this, I had a bunch of people contact me after they saw it on the Planning Commission agenda, and I didn't have any idea what it was about. So I thought it was either about reducing maintenance costs, because we've talked about these little pieces of open space, and are they, a problem for the town to maintain. I thought maybe it was because we're trying to get a little bit of money, and I was trying to evaluate that, or I thought maybe it's because we're trying to support farming. It seems like none of my additional hypotheses were correct. It's mostly about this transaction with the bike path. Is that true?
From my perspective, 100%.
Okay. So, and this owner has said that if we don't sell him that piece, he won't give, or is it an even swap? Plus he's paying us a little bit, or what's the, I don't know the logistics of that, or if they're public, or what's the deal?
Yeah, I don't think we could speak to purchase price at this point in open session, but perhaps if we needed to go into executive session and add that to the agenda.
Okay. So, I mean, the things that I've been thinking about as we've been discussing these little pieces of open space, and it came up also with the presentation with the consultants in January, is that these discussions that we have these little pieces of open space, and the feedback from the public has been incredibly consistent on this, that these are important little buffers in our neighborhoods. They contribute to how the town looks. I think the fact that we have these little pieces has actually developed an ethos of valuing open space that's fed into why we are the town that we are today. We've also been talking about the pollinator pathway. Pollinators don't require public access. Wildlife corridors don't require public access. We've also just joined Sustainable Connecticut and talked about the municipal coordinated energy, municipal aggregation fund. These little pieces could also be really important for new energy ideas that would serve a neighborhood. The most important thing we need to do with changes that are coming down the pike is make our communities more resilient, and that means local energy solutions. So these are places where we could put a local geothermal or a local solar or a local energy option that hasn't even been invented yet. So I think the swap is a separate issue, but I want to address head-on the idea that we're going to make a little bit of money for the town by selling these pieces. I think it's a terrible idea. In this case, I support farming, and so it seems like he's farming it. It seems like he's been doing it on a property that wasn't legally supposed to be supporting farm animals, which, okay, that's whatever that is. But I think the town should also be aware that now that he will have 5 acres, it will be a farm, and he can cut his taxes and make them farm taxes. So we're not going to be, whatever little bit of money we make from selling this property, we'll be losing far more than that over time. Like I said, I support farming. I'm actually have been looking for a 5-acre property. I mean, I'm wondering if I can buy the 4 acres behind my house and have my own little farm at the end of Madison Lane. And that's actually a pretty serious question.
It's actually a pretty interesting idea.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't necessarily think that the town should be rewarding people who are using town land without paying for it while we're charging our farmers for every square foot of town land that they're using for their farm. So I really support leasing this land. That would guarantee that the town would be getting the money. It could even be a lifetime lease. This person could use it as a farm if they wanted to. I think once you have a farm, there's a right to farm law. They can make it a farm and pay farm taxes. I don't think we can prevent that. So anyway, I would support leasing it. I think the taxes, farmland versus not farmland, are not a big deal in the big scheme of things, but, and I'm supportive of the bike path. I just think the whole swap thing makes me very uncomfortable, and I'd rather just purchase the land outright for the easement and lease the land to this landowner.
Had the property owner been open to purchase of the land for the easement? Or did he put it forward as a swap?
Put it forward as,
Had they
Should
been
we
asked?
Probably
or go to
executive session for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see if there would be support. Would there be support in adding an executive session to our agenda to
Yeah.
discuss? Is there a second?
Second.
All right, I moved it. Susan seconded
thank
it.
you.
All in favor?
Hi.
All opposed? Okay. Are there any, we'll certainly come back and discuss wherever we land publicly. Anything else anyone wanted to ask before we do executive session?
Can I just verify if he gets this parcel, has he actually got 5 acres? I read that under Lot 2, under the notes, his parcel's only 3.013.
He owns the adjacent lot as well.
Does he own all 3 of them?
Yep, he owns 2 and 3.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Motion to adjourn to executive session?
So moved.
Moved.
Second, Susan?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
So, would we be looking for a formal motion, Maria, from this group? Or is it more feedback?
Yeah, you're gonna have to take a motion, a formal motion, to the board. Do you want maybe 2 suggestions based on the comments?
Sure.
Maybe, so you're sending a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, based on some of the comments we heard, is that you can send, if you want to keep, I would say, keep the motion in the affirmative, and maybe say that affirmative for support of the sale of a portion of the open space behind the property at 133 Holcomb Street, with the consideration that either, or here's for sale first, consideration that a deed restriction be placed on the area of open space that no future structures shall be constructed.
Mhm.
Or you can have a motion to send to the Board of Selectmen that they would consider a life lease to the property owner of the area of open space.
Since this is ultimately a recommendation.
Correct.
Could we include both of those in the motion for the Board of Selectmen to
You-
consider?
You could.
Yeah.
You could.
Okay. Why don't we start there? Was there something you were going to add, Mike?
Nope.
Okay.
It's all you.
So I was going to move that and see if someone would second it, and then we could have a conversation. So I'll move what Mike suggested.
Both options? Yeah.
Okay. Susan, you seconded it?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Discussion?
Yeah, maybe, Maria, can you read back the motion?
So to send a positive referral for the sale of property. I'm gonna have to, work this out. For the sale of the property at
133
Thank
Holcomb.
you, 133 Holcomb. All right, so positive referral for the sale of the property at 133 Holcomb Street with a deed restriction that no future structures be placed on that parcel or a lifetime lease be considered.
That's what's on the table. I wanted to see if there was anything that anyone would add or change, or just wanted to add your thoughts regarding this process. I think the only thing that, I don't know if it's changed to the motion, but I just wanted to reiterate that we need to move forward. This I think is exactly why we need to move forward with a policy for when we sell parcels of open space. And similarly, I know this group had some conversation at one of our one or two meetings ago about how to prevent encroachment, and perhaps even leveraging groups of motivated volunteers. And that's work that I want to continue. In my mind, this positive referral does not have anything to do with those two initiatives. I think we should continue those. Anything anyone else wanted to add? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, the motion passes. I don't do math in public. Is that 4-2?
4-2.
4-2.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Thank you all for the discussion. So the next step, so the public knows, this is a recommendation that goes to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing. Maria or Mike, anything you would add that I missed? Next steps? Okay. Great.
Can
Yes,
I
Susan?
ask, I thought that we were going to separate those two things and not vote it in one motion. So I might have voted for a lease, but not for a sale. And
Oh,
I
I
feel
see.
like right now, there's no way to determine what the vote was.
You
So,
voted for a lease.
Motions?
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I have mixed feelings in general, but, I'm not opposed to leasing the land in its current use, particularly if that gave the town significant consideration for the easement for the bike path. So I don't know if I'm out of order bringing this up.
The difficulty with that is we aren't the negotiating folks. We can't determine whether or not a lease would be acceptable to the property owner. That has to be left to the people who are negotiating it. All we're doing is we're saying to them, here are your options. Please try to go and do your best. And then still, we're advisory from a standpoint of we're still going to the Board of Selectmen.
I guess I thought that this would signal to the Board of Selectmen that our board was supportive of leasing, but maybe not as supportive of
Yeah, I understand
selling
that.
it. That was my point.
So,
I could note that comment for the record, coming from you,
Sure.
if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I just think that
Okay.
would be helpful.
yeah. Bill, would that change your opinion if it were a lease?
Well, I'm going to kind of stand by my previous vote on the Planning Commission. Even seeing that there has been a slight change in the landscape of the conditions that would be imposed. But I'm going to stand pat. It's still not consistent with the way I would look at disposal of town open space.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is pollinators. Right. Marjorie, is there?
Well, there's still behind-the-scenes work going on. We had a presentation for you and Tom, and few other fellows on the Simsbury Farm.
Yeah, the assistant golf superintendent and the park superintendent attended the presentation as well.
So we were putting forth the reason why we need pollinator pathways, why we need to think, and we're exploring ideas of how we can put in some demonstration projects at the farms,
Yeah.
which is a nice central location, to minimize mowing and to increase habitat. And I know there's going to be a website coming soon so that it will centralize the information so that people can find out more about how to do these things in their own yard. I've been reading Douglas Talamay's new book, Nature's Best Hope, and he was saying, if we could just cut our lawns by a half, we would, the area east of Mississippi, it would be a greater area, and planted native plants, but it would be an area greater than the combined area of the Smoky Mountains, the Grand Canyon, the Tetons, the Yosemite. I mean, you go on and on and on with area. So we have the ability, not only through our open space to preserve nature, but we also have our own properties, which I like to think of as little backyard nature centers. So there's a lot that we can do in the interstices between these open spaces that we have, and indeed, we need to do that in order to preserve the integrity of the ecosystems.
Thank you. Just to add to that, we learned that First Church is going to be doing a pollinator garden, and then the Methodist Church, and are they doing one at the Ensign House?
We're working on that one.
Working on that one.
Working on that one.
And then we're talking about doing a show, like a show garden that the town would own at the farms. And I think I would love to use my social media and other publicity avenues to get the word out so our residents start to think differently about how they manage their lawns.
Thank you, and that's really what the pollinator pathway is to get people connected and thinking of themselves as being connected to those pathways.
Any
Thank you.
questions? All right. Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good.